Okay, so yeah, to start again, just to let you know, every fourth Friday of the month, we invite practitioners on the leading edge of what we call real-world co-intelligence. But this month is not a practitioner-focused case study. It is an exploration. The reason being that today falls the day after Thanksgiving and in the US, and we thought, a lot of people are going to be traveling or not around, so we anticipated there'd be a smaller call, but we wanted to have a space where we could do a little bit of exploration, and we're going to be focusing on two particular wise democracy patterns tonight: capacitance and appreciative thinking, from the wise democracy pattern language. So it's a little bit of an exploration. We're going to see what happens when we all come together to discuss these two patterns. Just before we get into the main part of the call, a little bit about Co-Intelligence Institute. We're a non-profit and our sort of guiding light, our vision is of a world that works for all. A world where human affairs are guided by wisdom that partners with all life and works for long-term broad benefit. So we focus on two key inquiries: co-intelligence, which is an inquiry into what would intelligence look like if we took wholeness, interconnectedness, and co-creativity seriously. And secondly, wise democracy, the exploration of what would democracy look like if we designed collaborative governance systems to appreciate, evoke, and engage the wisdom and resourcefulness of the whole on behalf of the whole. So we do that via sharing real-life stories, case studies, and we promote and develop tools such as pattern languages, group processes, and digital platforms to invoke and engage greater collective wisdom. And last but not least, we welcome people into learning communities like this call today, where we can deepen our understanding of co-intelligence and develop our capacity for wise relating and living well together. So to start off for this evening, just a little bit about this call tonight. It was initially, I've got another person coming in here. Yeah, so this call tonight was initially I had an idea that it would be great to do a call on capacitance. I have this feeling that it's the quality of abiding with uncertainty, difficulty, conflict, etc., is something that is really feels increasingly important in these times on so many levels. So I thought that it's an interesting pattern for us to explore at a kind of societal level, but also at a very personal level, how we hold conflict and difficulty ourselves individually. And then in discussing this with CII colleagues, we said, well, actually, it's the day after Thanksgiving. So let's try and bring a quality of Thanksgiving and appreciation into the call as well. So we brought together these two patterns, capacitance and appreciative thinking. And it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic. Already Tom and I have had a little bit of a discussion about what does appreciative capacitance look like. And that was a juicy conversation in itself. So we're hoping that we can have a juicy exploration together as a learning call today. So I'm just going to post into the chat what the program for today is. So we've got a 1.5 hour call. Tom's going to start off talking about appreciative thinking, and then we'll go have a broader discussion, possibly in breakout rooms if you feel there's enough people. We'll see. Then I'll have a little chat about capacitance, and then we'll discuss that all together, this quality of capacitance. And then we'll have a group exploration of what appreciative capacitance might look like. And then we'll finish off with a little guided exercise for developing appreciative capacitance that I'll share with you at the end. Any final thoughts? And then we'll finish. And what we usually do at the end of the call is we have a bit of a hangout, a sort of an after party where anybody can stay if they so wish, have a chat with us. that's the program. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Tom. Oh, okay, Liz, I've seen you just yet. You have to leave a bit earlier. Okay, that's fair enough. I'm going to hand over to Tom to kick off with appreciative thinking. And I'm going to do a screen share because I'm going to share the pattern language card. For any of you who are not familiar with the Wise Democracy pattern language, you can find it at wd-pl.com. Over to you, Tom.
Okay, let me see. I want to get some notes visible here, get off the full screen. Yeah, I am often insufficiently appreciative, so it was an interesting thing putting this into the pattern language. Uh, yeah, I tend to focus a lot on problems, possibilities also, but there's a sense of not having enough gratitude. But when I started to work on the pattern, I realized what an interesting word appreciation is. And there's a bit of a distinction between appreciation and appreciative thinking, to the extent that appreciation tends to focus on uh, an event, uh, and it's like you're appreciating something right then. That's showing appreciation or something like that. Appreciative thinking steps back more and this is a capacity. Uh, and to have that stance in life has certain impacts. And I began to explore the word. We had critical thinking as one of the patterns, and I thought this needs a balance somewhere. And so appreciative thinking was kind of that balance. And when I started exploring it, uh, appreciation it's a word packed with an interesting set of meanings. Most people think of, liking or valuing something, you appreciate it. But appreciation is also understanding. I I appreciate the importance of that. I can understand that. Uh, and also your property can appreciate in value, the sense of adding value. And I bridged that over into my experience and witnessing when somebody is appreciating something or someone, particularly something that's alive, it tends to become more alive. It tends to come to life. Uh, and speaking of children, uh, the idea of having an appreciative attitude towards a kid, either in an educational setting or a home setting or whatever, the kid tends to come to life as opposed to living in a critical environment where there's always something wrong. Appreciation, there's always something right. Uh, and I became fascinated with fitting those together. Uh, there's a way, it's like in Buddhism, it's like your your destructive activities and relationships are based, according to the Buddha, on your ignorance, your lack of understanding of something. And if you really understood fully, you would get you would get why something is that way, and you would have more affinity. It's a funny way in which appreciation brings compassion with it. Uh, and in the co-intelligence perspective, um, appreciation dances in the space of goodness and perfection. You're focusing on the good. It's a lot of stuff about how we should, positive thinking, focus on the goodness of things and the sense that everything is perfect. And there is a way in which everything is perfect. After all, it does fit. Look around you, everything's fitting. Uh, but the idea of appreciating the dark side, being able to the shadow, as they say, the things that we don't want to look at, that we don't want to have around, uh, the the quote unquote negative parts of polarities. Um, we're trying to understand and value and increase in value those things which are ordinarily shoved aside. And as I get into understanding that, and the yin yang sensibility, the sense that these things are dancing with each other, the two fish are chasing each other around the yin yang, but the significance of the opposite being in the eye or the heart of whatever the polarity is, and inside the polarity of the good and bad, there's something bad contained within the good, and there's something good contained within the bad, and being aware of the wholeness of things. And I began to see, since wholeness is like the fundamental underlying principle for co-intelligence, intelligence that takes wholeness seriously. Appreciation, the practice of appreciation, brings more of what is real into your ability to hold, and that starts to move over into the capacitance thing. I didn't realize before we posed this session, I didn't realize how intimately capacitance, and you see down associated related patterns, capacitance is actually there in the pattern itself. But I didn't realize how profoundly that's true, to the extent we are interested in welcoming in, appreciating the value of all aspects of reality. The more wholeness we are taking into account, and the more co-intelligent we can be. So those three dimensions dance together, and dance with the critical thinking. I've often done and seen appreciative critiques of things, where it's just not all cut down, you did this wrong, whatever, but saying there are some things that are really important and wise and good in what is being said or done or whatever, and there's these other possibilities that we can work with, about not only the good things, but the negative things are seen as possibilities and parts of the whole. I see that Charlie wants to know more about the perfection of things. There's a way in which I say there's two variations of wholeness, one of which is things are already perfect. They already fit. Wholeness is largely about the fitting together of parts into wholes and the interaction between those parts. Things already fit in a certain way, and we can come to see that. And there's a lot of spiritual practices that are tied to that. And there's also a lot of denial. We can just see the positive everywhere. But there's another aspect of wholeness, which is things can be broken, things can be sick, things cannot fit. And how is that perfect? Well, there's a funny way in which when something is broken or sick, there's an urge to heal. There's an urge to fix. There's counter energies that come to make it more whole. The word whole, heal comes from whole. Health comes from whole. Holy comes from whole. You want to bring it more, make it more sacred, make it more healthy. And there's a perfection in that dynamic. So that's one of the things, and I think of that as a second form of wholeness, and that's the one we usually live in. And appreciation helps us weave that. Oops, computer is running out of energy. I have to feed it. Yeah, so the fact that you're welcoming wholeness, or you welcome those things that are negative as well, and see in them energies and possibilities and information that can be used for making things more whole, more good. That is part of the wisdom. I have wholeness is true. Wholeness is taken into account when it needs to be taken into account for long-term broad benefit. And the prime directive, I realized that when I first did the prime directive, I was looking for what underlies all the 96 patterns. which are very different from each other. People couldn't look at the 96 patterns. There's just too much. And I was looking for what did they all, each one expresses a version, an aspect of what, of something. And what was that thing? And the prime directive was evoke and engage the wisdom and resourcefulness of the whole on behalf of the whole. That was the prime directive. And I got into studying indigenous things, and so much of the indigenous worldview is an appreciation of life, of the wonders of the world. And I realized that in order to do the evoke and engage, it needs to include appreciation. So I've added appreciation to the, to appreciate, evoke, and engage the wisdom and resourcefulness of the whole on behalf of the whole is now the way the prime directive is said. And that appreciation has possibility in it. You are drawing out something that is possible. Yeah, lots more to say, but a lot of it branches over into the integration or interaction between appreciation and capacitance. So I'll hold that for the time being. Check.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom. So now this is going to be an opportunity for us to discuss, talk about the appreciative thinking aspect, and to help that conversation along, I have a couple of sort of prompts here. What does this pattern evoke for you? And if you want to, what might, I'm not sure I've written this very well, what in your life, relationships, or in wider society might you like to bring more appreciative thinking to? Now, we could either go into 2 breakouts. Just thinking it could be, the advantage of going to 2 breakouts is everybody gets more of a chance to speak. How do people feel? Would people feel, is there any sense here of people preferring to stay in a larger group?
Larger group, I'm feeling, but I'm open. But
Happy to stay in larger.
Yeah.
What do you reckon, Liz? Yeah?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, let's do that then. So, anybody have something they'd like to? One thing I'd like to start off with as well is just maybe saying, I think this is something that the CII, the Co-Intelligence Institute, is aspiring to do. Really, it's about appreciating some of the initiatives that are going on around the world that we see that are really sort of adding towards wise collective outcomes. And so yeah, that sense of appreciating, as in like appreciating the amplifying, making something grow. I guess that's a lot about what we're trying to do at the moment. So just to kick the conversation off, anybody else have any thoughts on this pattern?
I had a quick one to just jump in. I think part of it, like, was the last part of your question had to do with what are you trying to appreciate or bring into appreciation, and I just thinking about the moment, every moment, any given moment. It's kind of a way that I try to remind myself as well throughout the day. So check. Hi, Dana. I was just talking about you this week.
I would like to. Hi. Oh, cool. I would like to respond because I was thinking about when you started talking about appreciation at our Education for Life schools here where I live in the village. There's this kind of awareness of what you appreciate is a choice that draws out a particular reality. And in general, in our culture, with kids in particular, it's like, oh, you're such a good artist, or you're such a good this, and you did this wonderful accomplishment. And those kinds of appreciations actually tend to make the self-esteem a bit more fragile, because the child builds themselves toward fulfilling this expectation. And the kinds of appreciations that build strength are like noticing their character and qualities of soul and spirit that they're developing, for example. And I just think that appreciation has a wisdom called into bear with it, of what it is, where you appreciate it, what level you appreciate. And we could really, I think, do with appreciating levels of being and process more than we do surface and endpoint. And along those lines, appreciating possibility rather than just positive or negative, like, oh, it's all great, or it's, let's look at the shadow. I'm not saying those aren't good, but just looking at what is unfolding that makes possibility happen, that makes more engagement with the whole. So just wanted to reflect that.
One way of looking at that, I didn't see but had a realization when I was talking to Andy earlier, is that appreciation in the ideal sort of sense that you're saying is looking at the heart of things. It's getting at the heart of things rather than the surface. It's like, what's really there? What is the unique specialness that is there in all its dimensions, you know? And being able to value, to perceive, to value, to understand, to call forth and see the potential of all that at the heart. So thanks a lot for that and reminding me of that.
Mm-hmm.
Annalie.
Thank you. What it evoked immediately was the sense of looking at something and observing something and engaging with something beyond labels and roles and functions and the likes. To engage with something without the charge of positive or negative, as you already shared, Dana, so beautifully, but to even go beyond that, to just be with it and to allow it to inform me, for example. Instead of me making a judgment about it, or even having a preference about it, and looking for my own filters, to just be with it. And for me, appreciation, first of all, is actually a feeling before it's an idea or a concept. It's something that I experience. It's just not just a thought. I feel it in my whole body.
Interesting. So yeah, there's a sense there of not even, it's not about appreciating something for its positive qualities. It's just the act of being with it. Interesting. That seems to have a lot. I think that has a lot of resonance for the next one we're going to look at as well, capacitance.
Being in appreciation might be another way to look at the appreciative thinking pattern, at least its attention.
Sorry, I spoke, and Liz, you unmuted. I was unsure. Did you want to say something, Liz?
Not a lot, but only that I liked. Well, I did appreciate the Tom's appreciation of the dark side, the shadow. I found that important as a way of taking a more whole approach to this. It can sometimes, it builds on, it can be the appreciative inquiry stuff, which I have worked with in the past, has been very much, what's working well and how do we build on that and where the energy is and all that. But actually there is something about the dark side and the shadow side which feels really important, as well as the possibility, as was also said by Dana. So yeah, I love what Michael's written as well, Maya Angelou's quote. Yeah, it's a relational thing too. It's not just you appreciating, it's then the impact that has on other as well.
And when I'm so new to the indigenous, my daughter is very much into indigenous perspectives, but the sense of what you just said, and the mutual appreciation of living in that consciousness as if the world, to appreciate the world and the world around you and know that it is appreciating you, this mutual respect on behalf of all entities. Like you could say living entities, but there's often in indigenous consciousness a much greater expansion of what is considered alive, intelligent, present, whatever, listening. The mountains are there, and they're valuing and understanding you as you value and understand them, kind of thing. It's like, okay, well, I'm a long way from being able to do that, but I can sense how potent that would be and what a different paradigm it would be to live in that kind of consciousness. Quite in addition to what we do with each other as people, as human people. The words are getting so hard.
I'd like to welcome you, Liama. We're just discussing the first pattern, which is appreciative thinking.
I thank you for letting me in. I'm not familiar with Eventbrite, and I just spent a half an hour trying to figure out before I finally found a little tiny piece of print somewhere that said that you'd send me a link. But thank you for letting me in. Yeah.
I'm glad you made it. Thank you. Anybody else have anything to say? We'll move on to the second one soon. If there's any other thoughts on this.
Could you say again which pattern you were just considering?
We have been exploring appreciative thinking.
Okay.
Yeah. I can put in.
Can I add one other thought in relation to all that's just been said? That it makes me think of a time when I was on the Zuni Indian reservation, and I was young at the time, and we were hanging out and in a group, and people were talking, and it was so strange at first because whenever anybody would speak, everybody would look down, and no one would look at you when you were speaking. And I couldn't figure it out. And then it was explained that, that gives you the space. You don't have this feedback right away of like, yeah, I really get it, or I don't really get it, So, and so it's like the appreciative process from just feeling this from some of what you've been saying is one of being, patiently present and allowing things to emerge and being in a space of allowing disclosure.
You can feel that also when our tendency to interact is a manifestation of our separateness. Very often, rather than coming from the whole to the whole, I often think of the fire in the center when you're doing circles as that represents or embodies the whole, and you are speaking from the whole to the whole. And if you get too much into the individual interaction, that fragments that dynamic. So I can imagine the looking down could be interpreted also as a grounding in the earth whole, not in the separate. As soon as we start looking at each other, we start to get into who we are and all the business of that.
Yeah.
Check.
Sometimes I can hear better when I'm not looking because I focus through the senses, which I don't know what all you said, but it makes me think of appreciative through multiple, like Tom said, through multiple ways of hearing. And,
Yeah.
I would offer maybe just a extra prompt, Tom. Maybe you were about to bring this in, but one thing that you mentioned at the beginning about the pattern was that it's a capacity. So maybe, I don't know if within your reflection on capacitance, you're already going to get there, but maybe what's the capacitance, perhaps as a lead-in? I was curious.
Interesting. Over to you, Andy.
Yeah, so a good segue there to looking at the second pattern. So I'm going to share screen. And I'm going to read here. So capacitance. We need the ability to tolerate disturbance and abide in an unsettled state. Complexity, uncertainty, mystery, paradox, conflict, crisis, and diversity can all generate such unsettledness. Yet all can also bring wisdom because they open us to a fuller reality. So learn to coexist comfortably, or at least patiently, with them so they can give their gifts in due time. So I'm just going to look at my notes here. Yeah, looking at this pattern on the pattern language website, Tom mentions that there is a term that he found from he picked up from a psychiatrist, and as the ability to hold dissonance and difficult things. I felt it would be really interesting to talk about this on a call because, yeah, as I said, I feel like we're living in a time where these things are seemingly more and more important. You know, the level of, it feels like, you know, with events that take place in the world over the last few years, things feel more volatile, more uncertain, certainly more complex. And yeah, I kind of, it's, capacitance is a capacity that I really value, I appreciate. I used to live, in my past, I spent quite a while living in a Buddhist monastery. And so I got to do a lot of meditation. And since then, I've been quite interested in a variety of psycho-spiritual modalities. And I appreciate that they have been able to develop this sense of capacitance in me, at least to some degree. And yeah, I see it as being so important, like on one level, you know, for example, in our personal lives, in our relationships, there's always moments where, you know, there are others who will have a different idea about how to do things, and that creates a tension. Or at a societal level, you know, in our politics, there are obviously all kinds of different ideas and divergent perspectives around how to manage society, economics, environmentally, how we move forward. And so I think in general, our culture has, it feels like we haven't really developed this muscle of capacitance enough. And that we try to resolve this divergence and complexity by sort of collapsing it into simplicity. So I was thinking about our democratic systems. You know, we have all this difference of opinion and different diversity, and we have these different political parties with their manifestos that sort of already simplifies the differences of opinion that may be out there. And then we have a voting system that is, you know, a winner takes all kind of scenario that once again collapses this tension that exists between difference. And yeah, so and I think also, you know, in our relationships, if we're not able to hold the tension of difference and difficulty, we once again, we either collapse it into sort of lashing out or withdrawing and you know, separating. And that when we learn to live, like this quality of capacitance helps us to find generative outcomes. You know, there's something a bit uncomfortable here, but can we stay with it? Can we stick with it? So yeah, so I think it's a really great pattern for the wise, you know, in thinking about wise democracy. It's like, okay, well, let's stick with this dissonance. Let's stick with this tension and see what comes out of it and go deeper into it. So there's a sense here, this may be sort of connecting to the appreciative capacitance is where, okay, we're appreciating that there's this dissonance, but maybe something good can come out of it if we stick with it. Also, I wanted to talk about yeah, it also brings up for me. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this. I don't know what to call him, a philosopher, or he's certainly a polymath, a really scholarly guy called Ian McGilchrist, who's written this book called The Master and His Emissary. And he talks about, you know, how we have these two different hemispheres of the brain, and that I think it's well, I always get confused here. I think it's the right hemisphere. Yeah, the right hemisphere, which is the one that actually holds the big picture. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. I was just thinking
Yeah.
that myself about his work in relationship to what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. The right hemisphere has this sense of intuition. It holds big picture. It has a sort of more holistic outlook. And then the left hemisphere is very much grasping onto the parts. It's grasping onto aspects of reality and thinking they're kind of the only reality. And I think our culture has very much got into that. You know, if you, I don't know, it's like, I don't know, progressives and conservatives, or, you know, if you're a progressive, you can only see that part of the thing. And somebody who speaks from another point of view, it's like, no, that's wrong. Or whereas this capacitance feels to me like this more of this right hemisphere quality of holding the whole, and like, okay, there's differences going on here. Yeah, and also that for me also, I see this as a facilitator as well, being a really hugely important quality. You know, the ability to hold, like when you're working with a group, and you know there are differences coming up, and you so you're holding the group, and there are all these different perspectives that are coming up, and sometimes somebody will say something that seems totally strange or unrelated, and then you're looking at the clock and you're thinking, oh, we've only got 5 more minutes to do this. So you're having to hold all of these different realities and things at the same time. And I feel that, you know, that is a really important muscle that facilitators need. So anything else here? I think some of those are some of the main things that I really wanted to say. I'll be offering at the end of the call a little practice, which is called holistic releasing, which is looking at how to hold both sides of something. And I found that very, very useful. Yeah, I think that's enough for me for the moment. If anybody has anything that they would like to rip off of what I've just said. Whoops, I've just...
Well, I'm sorry to jump right in, but I was thinking the whole time you were talking about the Ian McGilchrist, you know, right and left hemisphere. And it's really interesting because it's the dual hemispheres, as he explains in the book, is found early on, way before human beings emerge, and all the advanced nervous systems have it. And the image that has held it so clearly for me is he has like a bird, which also has a dual brain, is looking at the ground and seeing, is it a grain or is it a rock? So it's basically food or not food, you know, and it's ultimately the part of the brain that evolves binary intelligence, which is in the computer we're using here. But it's like yes, no, black, white, is or on or off. And then the right brain is constantly needing to survey the circumstances and know, is that rustle over there a predator, or is it the wind? And is that the light through the trees, or is it something approaching? And what's that sound? And the right hemisphere always succeeds when the options are kept open and more information is continually gathered. And so, I don't know, I thought that was really interesting to kind of recognize that we are in such a binary society with polarization happening at the extreme right now.
Absolutely, yeah. And our online interactions seeming to amplify that rather than kind of resolve that. There doesn't seem to be much capacitance online somehow.
Yeah.
It's in the design of the platforms and tools too, though. You know, maybe first and foremost, I would say, but kind of all the above, but it's not the people so much as we might imagine.
Yep. Thanks.
It makes a lot of money
Yep.
and power for, you know what I mean.
Because of, Charles, do you mean because of amplifying algorithms that create profit when there's controversy? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Conflict, controversy, clicks, money. Yeah, for sure. Extraction, all of that. So they set it up to feed that machine. It's and now much more so, of course, with you know what. So. Meaning, you know, what they're calling AI, but I'm so tired of this term, but it's because it's so vague.
So what does this pattern evoke for you, for others?
Well, I threw in the chat about resilience. That was something coming up. It didn't cover that sort of dynamic towards simplification and polarization specifically, but maybe just the adaptiveness. There's another sense of it that brought me to resilience. Check.
This pairing of appreciative and capacitance is sparking an incredible number of pathways for me. One is, what are the ways that we've evolved to hold this? For instance, in a long-term loving relationship, the commitment to the relationship allows the partners to deal with the conflict of an issue because they're grounded in a larger picture than it's as if the capacitance is holding smaller parts of a whole. And so if as a group we can ground in some larger one, I'm thinking of how as you go up the scale of size, in a social network, you simplify in a way. I mean, here we are, these little humans with all these different sorts of connections. And then when we go to our book club, we're looking at something else. When we go to our political party, we're looking at something else. And then as you keep going up, each group kind of simplifies in a way the elements it's looking at. But then that simplification creates a new complexity across the group level, so that the capacitance is, in some cases, a distance across scales. In some cases, it's just that you focus in on this whole arena and you're leaving out all these others. There's also the quick thinking, fast thinking, slow thinking, whoever the guy who did that drives me a bit nuts. But there's the quickest survival assessment and also the quick social survival assessment, which becomes kind of habitual. You walk in this sort of group and your brain has created a unity out of all past and everythings for an instantaneous grounding you in the situation. But our brain also has these capacities that allows us to break out of that. And one is safety. And as a moderator, you're creating safety so people can step out of the quick survival. Because if you're in survival, you got to be quick. I mean, if it's true survival, I mean, that saber-toothed tiger doesn't wait while you consider the options. So the importance of getting a group out of survival mode is there. And also, let's say, the emotional modalities that we've developed to move out, such as curiosity, playfulness. We have modalities. I mean, the joy of the new, the human also revels in the new. And there are ways, emotional ways that we've developed to help us hold that tension because we've had to deal with the complexity. So I love this appreciative complexity because that gives a clue into one of the key emotional, oh, wow, this is not a new lover. This might be, not a new enemy. This might be a new lover here, sparks into a different state of arousal, or a new friend. Oh, that's a different state of arousal. So I just love this pairing.
It's amazing. Thank you, Liama. That's loads of really wonderful insights there. It kind of made me think a little bit about what Charlie was saying about, how the design of these platforms putting us into this kind of very sort of what do they call it, the reptilian brain, the reptilian, the fight, flight, and that in order to give rise to this creativity, curiosity, playfulness, we need to feel this sense of safety, and we need to be able to flip out of the reptilian brain and be into I don't know what the other brain is called, but the one that's much more sort of open and creative. And yeah, that our culture somehow really needs more and more spaces to do that, I guess, online, offline, in person, everywhere.
For me, it evoked immediately as you were starting to share, Andy, I was inquiring inside what happens with me when I'm in such a situation where there's conflict or dissonance and the likes. And I've noticed for myself that it depends on where my awareness is in my body. If my awareness is out there, when I look at something or listening to something, it's much easier to be triggered by it and to give some kind of reactive response to it. Whereas I take a moment to just take a deep breath and bring my awareness back into my own body for whatever way, it's a completely different experience. And then I can actually hear more, and my awareness expands, and I'm able to hold more without identifying with it or as it. So that judgment of the good, bad, right, wrong, polarity doesn't happen at all then. I'm just simply, again, being with it, but it's not always easy to take that pause and to bring my awareness back into my body. But I notice the more I do it, the more it starts to happen naturally. So it becomes a pattern in my own state of being as well. And then it's fascinating what I actually do hear and observe when my own awareness is in my own body. And sometimes I just put my hand on my belly button, for example, while listening. And then there's more the sense of wholeness and of the bigger whole. I'm not separate from it. So I don't have to fear or judge or go into a state of uncertainty or fear and the likes.
I'm really curious here. So when you're, let's say, I don't know, in a given situation, that are you a facilitator?
I do facilitate as well, yes. But let me give you an example. In 2020, my mom, she fell at the old age home during COVID, and she was admitted in hospital, and we couldn't go and visit her. And my ability then to just be with my own awareness, my body, because I couldn't go to her, in relation to what my siblings experienced, was very different. So it was taking me back to the appreciative thinking space. So the two were connected, but I had the capacity to just be with wherever I was with her and not identify what happened to her as good to bad, right or wrong. And when she did pass just after that, it was interesting again how I experienced her death experience, because it was not like it's still life it continued in another space, in another dimension. So it was very practical. But at that time, my awareness was completely inside of me. It wasn't out there that I could have that differentiation. I don't know if that helps. That's just a practical example.
Is it like a simultaneous awareness of being aware of being in the body and at the same time present to the world?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Any reflections? Don't know. Liz, Shamichael, any?
Yeah, I was struck by the connection to mystery as part of this. That's sort of not knowing. And also in the word patience, there's something about tolerating the discomfort that holding this tension can evoke. And I suppose the other bit for me was some interest in kind of Gestalt and things like that, which to me, there's a lot around that sort of holding polarities and that sort of creative indifference and or compassion on attachment. You know, there's some of those phrases, but I love this word. It seems in a way capture that somehow more for me, and as a kind of quality or as a practice for particularly thinking about my work with leaders as well, working in very complex contested spaces, and how to develop a quality of how do you pronounce it? Capacitance. I can't say it.
Capacity.
Yeah, but there's it's you know, I was just thinking, gosh, that would because sometimes some of the stuff around Gestalt is it feels a bit too kind of hard for people to grasp, or the phrasing, but you know, developing the quality of capacitance to handle this sort of brittle, complex world we're in. It really spoke to me. So yeah, so there's a number of things it's raising for me. I've got no answers to it, but I like the link to mystery, because that speaks to the spiritual domain, which feels quite important in this. So yeah, just throwing a few thoughts out there, or questions.
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, I'd never heard of I'd never really thought of this quality with this word capacitance until I saw it in Tom's pattern language. So yeah, it's I find it a useful word. Yeah. Anyone else?
I've just seen what Tom's put in the chat, another pattern, dancing among clarity, inquiry, and mystery. Is that the same as capacitance?
No, it's a separate pattern.
A separate pattern.
It's in the pattern language. It notes that clarity is the sort of aha, that fits, you know, and the danger of making that into certainty. So not having it become certain, which is a nailing down thing, but allowing the clarity to happen. And then when contrary data shows up, be able to move into inquiry, like let the clarity dissolve and become an unknown, and inquire. And a positive response to the unknown is humble inquiry. And regardless of, and then clarity shows up again after you pursue that often. When you don't have clarity, then the capacitance becomes really important. You're holding the lack of clarity. And all of that is happening within the context of mystery, because you never get it all. You never understand it all. And that's an assumption within co-intelligence. The whole is too big to grasp all of, to be all of, that we allow it to be beyond whatever we are, whatever we know, whatever we're sensing, and have that inform the dance between clarity and inquiry, and being able to rest outside of clarity and inquiry in the mystery, at which point it becomes a form of capacitance.
Thank you.
I imagine it's not easy for Shamichael to speak in a library. Is that correct? Yeah. So I'd love to. I'm going to read out. I just read what Shamichael wrote here in the chat, which I think is really interesting. In the recent advisory from the US Surgeon General about the epidemic on loneliness and isolation, much attention is given to belonging. Within that definition is a new framework for belonging that highlights 4 elements of belonging. 1, opportunities to belong. 2, motivations to belong. 3, perceptions of belonging. And 4, competencies for belonging. Capacitance, I think, is crucial to 4 competencies for belonging. I think even within the fragmented society we're seeing in the US, that there is good size group that don't mind spending time with the other, particularly as it relates to shared experiences, but lack the skills to do so. Capacitance is a major component. Yeah. Thank you, Shamichael.
That evoked in me,
yep,
the again, the indigenous sense of belonging to a larger life, and the difference between belonging to a group, belonging to life, belonging to the universe. You know, there's all these layers of belonging, and to what extent can you hold them? And the larger the sense of belonging, of what is alive and companioning you, what you're part of, the more capacitance you have for the disturbance, it seems to me. That's really interesting to dance between the belonging and capacitance patterns.
Yeah. Not only being able to hold, but being held. Like this aspect of like, we are held by something greater than us. Yeah.
Which certain people, and Christians who really believe that God or Christ is holding them at all times, have a comparable kind of experience, particularly if they see that of God in every person. There's lots of variants of how that manifests.
Fantastic. I wonder if we can now move on to this inquiry into appreciative capacitance. What does this word mean? What does it conjure up for people? Tom, you came up with it, didn't you? Kind of almost spontaneously on one of our
when we were thinking of combining the two, it was like, oh, okay, that suggests appreciative capacitance, and it was like a whole new realm to poke around in, see what does that add up to. So that's what this session is becoming, a variation of that, extension of that inquiry. And I noticed one of the things that are intimately related to the combination is my favorite pattern of all, pattern 88. It's the only pattern I know the number of, which is using diversity and disturbance creatively. Which is like, okay, so we're facing the extinction of humanity, the collapse of civilization, the wipeout of vast ecosystems. How do we use that creatively? And requires the combination of appreciation and capacitance to even think in that space. Because there's no obvious answer. So you have capacitance requires just being able to live in the question and see where it goes. And to love that it's not to appreciate the fact that it's not easily resolved. Where we really would like to resolve this problem really well. Anyway. And I realize that's intimately related to another thing that it's not in the pattern language, but I've come to critique. I wrote a blog post on the problem with problem solving. The problem solving is an effort to resolve, to end, to wipe out the disturbance of the problem's existence. And it disturbs you until you can solve it, in which case it goes away. And the whole consciousness of away, which is so toxic, you know, we can throw our garbage and it goes away. We can flush our toilet and it goes away. No, it doesn't. It's, you know, so that there's something other than problem solving. And problem solving is linear. You go from the problem to the solution. And reality isn't linear. Reality is complex and interactive, dynamic, filled with diversity. And it's like, okay, so what can hold the space of problem solving, but be in a different paradigm that has to do with complex wholeness evolving, change, shift in our participation, something. I don't know. It's an inquiry for me, but it's a very juicy inquiry. And like, we have to solve climate change. It's like, no, climate change needs to solve us, and we need to shift in some way where climate change is no longer a problem. There's a unity of something that is happening that is different from what was before. All those dance, I mean, things that were separate patterns sort of start merging and dancing together in various ways, which is to me exactly what the pattern language should do.
Thank you, Tom.
I have a thing I'd like to offer, which it's residing here on a small post-it note, but it's a phrase that I've been using, maybe for a year. Well, there's been a lot of personal, I mean, for everybody, but this year's been especially challenging with some loss and a whole lot of things. And somehow along the way, I came up with this phrase, which is basically four words, three phrases that I varied the sequence, and it involved, and I was kind of coming into the session thinking maybe I didn't really get to diving into the capacitance pattern, but thinking that it could actually be this appreciative capacitance. And the idea is a greeting and expressing gratitude and embracing an invitation. And the words are simply hello, thank you, and welcome. And I'll just offer one more thing. It's a bit meta, but I kind of started to practice this. For example, I for a couple of years, at the very end of a hot shower, I've turned on the cold for like a little tiny bit. So it's during that phase change when you sort of like, sort of embracing it and welcoming it and expressing gratitude for all of that. And anyway, there's more to the reflection in any given, and even just sort of chopping vegetables, like, killing vegetables. I'm sort of going into this thinking about phase changes. And so that's what I wanted to bring in here, thinking maybe there's something in this appreciative capacitance there. So thanks.
I love that. Hello, thank you, welcome. So simple.
Dana.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charles. That was great. I appreciate that. And Tom, what you were saying about the problem solving is so important and so interesting. It makes me think of kind of one of the big differences between the epistemology of Western culture and Eastern cultures, in that in our way of thinking, if you get down to the answer, you've gotten it. Like, the equation formula, like x plus this equals that. And when you get to the equal sign, it's like, we did it. We've gotten to truth, And in the East, something is deemed more true when it has more layers of resonance. Like, something is more true when more things relate to it metaphorically and mythically, and that gathering of additional layers actually signifies greater truth, rather than the downsizing down to the single. The meaning of the universe is 42.
Thank you, Dana.
For me, thank you, Donna, for that. My body was just like very joyful when you shared that. And also, Charles, I could feel the opening up to something which relates back to you, Tom, what you said about using the diversity and the disruptions and the disturbances in a creative way. And for me, when we create an invitation for something to unfold and to emerge in a group, this can happen because we don't have to defend something or validate anything and the likes. So we are just able to go on an adventure to explore. And through invitation, then there's an opening up that we can step beyond the so-called problem to explore what's possible. And then we can experiment with that and see where it wants to go and the likes. But there's something else happening when you begin anything in such a state of appreciation, like the hello, thank you, welcome, and then invitation to explore without needing to validate and to explain and to justify, so to speak. Because then we are free to explore other possibilities. And from an energetic point of view, if we look at a problem solving, we're still stuck to the problem. So we can't explore something else because our focus is still on the problem. So it's a linear, like you said, Tom, it's a linear way. And to see beyond that in all directions, in the different layers, we need to be able to explore this way and not just this way to that problem. So it actually hooks us. So we can't see anything beyond it. That's why it's so difficult to find solutions to a problem, because it's still in essence there.
What's coming up for me is I'm wondering, given like we're sort of realizing how important this quality is, and I'm wondering, how easy would it be to teach this? Does anybody have a sense of that? I'm not too sure. I mean, I guess it is possible, but it's not an easy thing.
I don't think it's about teaching. It's about just inviting. That's how you start something. It's just the invitation. So it's more experiential, immersive experience than teaching somebody. They get to feel and experience it, and then it becomes like a habit because they're feeling it all the time, practicing. Yes, Charles.
So maybe it.
I want to welcome Rosa, who's just come in.
Apologies, I totally lost track of time.
No worries. We're coming towards the end of the call, but we've explored appreciative thinking and capacitance, and now we're sort of riffing around appreciative capacitance. Over to you, Leoma.
Well, maybe it's a question of, or a process of inviting people into a new territory, which isn't exactly teaching so much, saying, look, and this is here waiting for us. I had a friend, Kale Mbulu, an artist who was Ugandan, spent a boyhood there, and he said that in his culture, you weren't considered an individual until you were older. That this whole individuality thing wasn't something thrust upon you immediately in kindergarten. It was, so it had a more relaxed way of developing that core of individuality that you defend. But but because of political stuff, his family had to leave the country, and he spent a lot of time international. And he said, I will be embarrassed. I will become embarrassed. Don't let that bother you. It was like he recognized that this embarrassment, which can feel deadly, we start to feel embarrassment, and then it's like and it's related to shame, which is, and both of these are group survival things. We've offended the group somehow, and we don't want the group to throw us out. You know, it hits on a really primitive level. But the invitation to let that be turned into that prickle of discomfort, not to go into the story, but to have a different story. It's about to change the story into this is the approach to mystery or to possibility, or how can we change the story from the emotions that are going to come up when they're very first coming up before they've grabbed on to a complete story, which then goes to a story of how we should react to this to defend ourselves or our group. You know.
Thank you so much, Leona. I think your comment there really is a great segue into what I'm going to offer now, because we're coming towards the end of the call. And I said at the beginning that I'd be sharing a little exercise, a little practice. And it's really very much about helping to sort of calm the story or dissolve the story. And it's also very much related to Charlie's comment about, you know, this ability to say hello, thank you, welcome to whatever's going on. And so the practice comes from, it's something that I learned through looking into, I don't know if any of you have heard of the Sedona method. It's about releasing, letting go of all kinds of emotions, and it's a practice that was created by someone called Lester Levinson and his protege, Hal Dwoskin. And this is called holistic releasing. And I'm just going to read a little bit here, just to give you a little background, because it's kind of quite connected to what we've been looking at. And here, Hal Dwoskin writes, most of us live life as though we can hold on to good and get rid of the bad. But in so doing, we miss the obvious. Think about it. When you try to hold on to something good, it always slips away. Whenever you try to clutch onto what you judge as good or that which you prefer, it is elusive and tends to move through your awareness. And then think about the inverse of this. What happens when you resist or try to hold away what you don't like? That's right, it persists or appears to get even bigger. So in effect, what most of us has been doing is pulling what we don't like towards us and pushing what we do like away. We also spend a lot of time and energy keeping these polarities of opposites alive by trying to keep what we like as far away as possible from what we don't like. And this takes an enormous amount of energy and creates which we call problems. So this perception of duality also ignores the underlying unity, which is here before the mind and is unaffected by all the pairs of opposites. So what we're going to do here is a little practice which is called holistic releasing, and it's about simply focusing on welcoming both sides of a polarity by going back and forth between them. So for instance, we're going to look at something most of us, you know, when we can at times feel contracted and we can feel expansion, and we know that contraction is a reality, exists, and we know that expansion and relaxation and openness exists. So we're going to do this by asking ourselves two questions. First of all, could I allow myself to feel as contracted, as tense as I do in this moment? And you just ask yourself the question, could I allow it? Could I welcome it? Could I say, hello, thank you, welcome? And then you invite the opposite to mind. Could I allow myself to feel as expanded, open and relaxed as I am. And then we go back. Could I allow myself to feel as contracted as I do right now? And just be aware of whatever contraction is there, whatever you might feel in the body, any tension in the mind. Allow it to be. Say hello, welcome, thank you. And then could you allow yourself to be as open and expanded, as relaxed as you are? Welcome that. Allow it to be here. And then could you allow yourself, once again, to feel as contracted as you do right now? I think my daughter feels contracted right now. She's crying, if you can hear her in the background. Just noticing whatever tension is there and allowing it. Hello, welcome, thank you. And then could you allow yourself to be as open, expanded, peaceful, relaxed as you are? Welcoming contraction. And now welcoming relaxation. Noticing, holding contraction. Noticing, embracing openness, relaxation. Okay, that's just a little example of holistic releasing. You can work on any pairs of opposites like that in any kind of, you can say, can I allow myself to resist? It could be a specific scenario, could I allow myself to resist X person as much as I do? Could I allow myself to welcome X person as much as I do? You can do it on loving, hating, allowing yourself to want to change, allowing yourself to let go of wanting to change, allowing myself to say no to, allowing myself to say yes to something. Even on, your attitudes to things, like, could you allow yourself to resist having money as much as you do? Could you welcome having money as best you can? So there's all kinds of applications of it. And the idea basically is that it kind of calms the story and that it opens us to to being able to a little bit like we've been talking about, to live without the story so much, and be in the moment. Okay, so that's my offering there. Any reflections after that? Any thoughts, feelings, questions?
Well, I'll offer that because of physical circumstances in my body, I immediately had to put in 3 things, not 2. Can I allow myself to be as physically contracted as I am? And then what third thing can I allow myself to be as emotionally or whatever? And so I just offer that to play with the exercise was putting in 3 things, or some sort of first, what's in the territory, and and maybe it's 4 things in the territory that you're playing with, accepting it. And also just by saying allow myself, you've established a larger space of safety. Yeah.
Thank you, Leona. Yeah. Rosa.
I'm just really intrigued by Leona's statement, Leoma, because I come from a focusing practice background, and one of the things we really encourage people to do is to adapt whatever inner practice is being offered to suit their own inner experience. So we have this thing called instructions for not following instructions. So I was just really surprised that it came up spontaneously here, because I think it's a really useful thing to do, to listen to our own internal guidance and figure out how we need to adapt whatever is being offered in order to be more true to our own experience.
Thank you, Rosa.
Just a quick, I had to adapt, and it helped me to discover the value of the one part of that little triad that Charles shared with us that I hadn't really appreciated, which was hello. I'm like, hello, yeah, let's get on to I appreciate you or whatever, But when it was coming to like my own tension, it was like, no, how about I start with hello?
Well, just to tag on there, I mean, as I maybe I said quickly in passing, but the spirit of it that I've come up with is to really to vary the order, like according to really the moment. What's what comes up first. If it's like if I'm going up on my little rooftop terrace garden, which is a sanctuary, and the sunshine greets me, then I greet it, welcome, and then it just depends. So play with it, yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's the discomfort, isn't it? Sometimes we need to say hello to first. We don't want to acknowledge it even most of the time. So it's 1 minute before the end of the official close of this call. And yeah, I don't know, maybe if anybody wants to stay on, you're most welcome. And I've just realized I should be sharing a couple of things, which is that we continue to have every 4th Friday of the month, and we're continuing next month in December with a call with Sita Magnuson, who's on the board of CII, Pasqualina Azzarello, talking about the East Hampton Futures Project, which is an experiment in citizen-driven planning. I'm going to post the link to that in the chat. So if anybody's interested in that, you're very welcome to come and hear about that. And if anybody is there anybody here who isn't subscribed to the newsletter? If not, I'm going to put that in the chat there as well, because that's where you get all the info from what we're doing each month. Thank you, Liz. Yeah, it's been great to have you.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care. Yeah, so yeah, please do come back if you found this of value. And, we'd love to have you in our gatherings. We've also got the final gathering of the Tao of Democracy gathering that we've had. I don't know if, not everybody here has been on that. That will be next Wednesday, the 29th. And have I got a link to that here? I will send it out to everybody who's been on this call with the recording, so you make sure you get that. That's next Wednesday. You're very welcome to come along to that. And with that, thank you so much for coming. We will hang out for a little while together if you want to continue the conversation. Otherwise, yeah. Really appreciate you being here. I don't know, maybe it would be nice for each of us just very quickly to have one word of whatever it comes up to leave the call as a go around.
Wow.
Leoma, one word.
Hello.
Annalie.
Brightness.
Charlie.
Spark.
Dana.
Yay!
And Rosa.
Sorry, Charlie. Andy, I can't do it in one word. It's like looking forward to watching the recording.
Tom, we've done it already. It's just me. Well, I loved hello, from Charles. That's I love that. So it's hello and goodbye.